Kamala Harris says that America, not China, will win the competition in the 21st century. Vladimir Putin says that a shift towards a multipolar world order has already begun and that it is irreversible. It is clear that the power struggle between the multipolar and the unipolar world orders is set to intensify regardless who wins the US election. There's no denying that Russia is winning the war in Ukraine. But is the Brics any closer to mounting a serious challenge to the US economic hegemony? What are the three decisive factors in the race to the top? How will the US dollar do in 2025? Is it a coincidence that the 2024 BRICS Summit in Russia was held in the same week as the IMF World Bank annual meetings in Washington, D.C.? Coincidence or not, the BRICS could not make any clear their unhappiness with the current international financial architecture. The final communique of the summit calls for a reform of the system and a more inclusive and just system. As ambitious as this may sound, the communique was light on concrete steps. Indeed, the much talked about independent cross-border settlement and depository infrastructure is still only at the stage of discussion and feasibility study. Notwithstanding the symbolic unveiling of a BRICS banknote at the summit featuring the flags of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, the communique was silent about a BRICS currency, suggesting a lack of consensus about its practicality or even desirability. I don't know about you, but if I learned anything at all in 2024, is that it is too early to write off the unipolar order centered around the US and the dominance of the US dollar. The biggest macro story this year has been the resilience of the US economy that is growing twice as fast as was expected at the end of last year. Against this backdrop, the US dollar that the BRICS is so eager to dethrone is having another good year. Among the BRICS currencies, the only currency that has done better than the US dollar this year is the South African rand. The Brazilian real has lost 15% against the greenback and the Russian ruble 7%. The RMB is only slightly weaker than the dollar, but this is likely only because of suspected currency interventions by Beijing. It is understandable that the BRICS countries that account for 50% of the world's population want to be unshackled from the tyranny of the US dollar. But talk is cheap. What would it take to actually challenge the king dollar? Since the collapse of the Bretton Woods system and the start of the era of floating exchange rates in 1973, the dollar has completed two full cycles. The first cycle began with the adoption of a mix of easy fiscal but tight monetary policy under Ronald Reagan that sent the dollar soaring. The cycle peaked with the signing of the famous Plaza Accord. The dollar fell steadily in the subsequent 5 years and did not find a bottom until 10 years later. The second dollar cycle began in 1995, the year that Yahoo was incorporated, Amazon opened its online store, and eBay held its first online auction. The cycle peaked with the bursting of the dot-com bubble and the September 11 attack on the Twin Towers. Like in the first cycle, once the cycle turned, it was all the way downhill. It took 10 years before the dollar finally troughed. The dollar started its third cycle in 2014, the year that US oil production increased by the most in 100 years, and the US embarked on a path to energy independence. Unlike the two previous cycles, the dollar's ascent has not followed a straight line. This could be why 10 years into the upcycle, the dollar has so far not shown any sign of peaking. Why is the dollar doing so well? How vulnerable would it be in 2025? To answer these questions, we need a framework for identifying the key drivers of exchange rates in the current global paradigm. But first, we need a measure of currency strength and weakness. Because my interest in this video is the big market cycles that take years to play out. My preferred measure of currency strength is the real trade-weighted exchange rates. This measure also has the advantage of making cross-country comparisons easier. For my analysis, I'm going to use the monthly series published by the Bank for International Settlement. On this chart, I have ranked 24 major currencies according to the z-scores of their real trade-weighted exchange rates calculated using a 20-year window. This approach is necessitated by the fact that not all currencies among these 24 currencies are freely floating. In my methodology, a strong currency is one that is trading near the top of its trading range of the past 20 years, while a weak one is trading near the bottom of its trading range. Based on this framework, the strongest currency in the world at the moment is the Singapore dollar. The US dollar is in second place, and the Swiss franc in third place. At the bottom, we have the Norwegian krona, the Japanese yen, and the Chilean peso. In the middle of the pack, we have the RMB, the Australian dollar, the Mexican peso, and the Indonesian rupiah, and the euro. Among the Brics currencies, the Indian rupee is the strongest, while the Brazilian real is the weakest. Now that we've established the relative strengths of different currencies, we can ask ourselves, what makes some currencies stronger than others? I've spent the better part of the last 30 years analyzing and forecasting currency returns. If I've learned anything at all, it's that drivers of exchange rates do not remain the same over time. Innovation has always been an important determinant of the competitive position of any economy. But as the power struggle between the unipolar and the multipolar world orders intensifies, the ability to innovate has become a matter of life and death as technology leaders guard their know-hows ever more jealously. The third dollar cycle is mostly about technology. I don't know about you, but to me it is quite obvious that the dollar strength of the past few years owes much to the fact that American companies account for 8 out of the 10 most valuable technology companies in the world today. So which countries are the most innovative in the world right now? There are many different ways to measure innovativeness, but I like the Global Innovation Index created by the World Intellectual Property Organization that uses 80 different variables to measure the education, infrastructure, and knowledge creation of different economies. In the 2024 Global Innovation Ranking, Switzerland is in first place, followed by Sweden, the US, and Singapore. Among the Brics countries, China is the highest ranked, ahead of France and Japan, and South Africa is the lowest ranked. What's more, there's a 28% correlation between the ranking of our 24 currencies and the Global Innovation Ranking. Unsurprisingly, countries with the strongest currencies right now, like Switzerland, the US, and Singapore, also happen to be the most innovative. This is also true among Brics countries. China and India, which have the strongest currencies, are also ranked higher in innovativeness than South Africa, Russia, and Brazil. How easy would it be for the Brics countries to close the innovation gap with Switzerland, the US, and Singapore? It won't be easy because innovation is not about doing one thing well, but doing many things, if not everything, well. And these countries are not just sitting on their hands either. Moreover, they're already enjoying the hub effect that will be difficult for other countries to dislodge. But China is making a big push, and so is India. These countries definitely have the economies of scale. But Switzerland, Singapore, and Sweden showed that small is beautiful. Innovation is important, but it's not everything. As population ages around the world, access to a growing labor force has never been more important for the global economic race. On this chart, I've ranked our 24 major economies by their population growth over the past 2 years. Singapore, once again, ranks at the top. In second place, we have Saudi Arabia. Australia and Canada are tied for third place. Israel comes next. At the bottom of the ranking, we have Japan and Russia. China and Korea also saw their populations shrink over the past 2 years. You may be wondering whether our currency ranking is correlated with our population growth ranking. The answer is very much yes. The correlation is 39%, even higher than the correlation with the innovation ranking. Singapore is high in both the currency and the population growth ranking. In contrast, Japan is very low in both rankings. The US is an outlier, with very low population growth over the past 2 years. However, I suspect this is due to a measurement problem. The Census Bureau is likely massively undercounting population increase due to illegal immigration. Indeed, as I argue in another video, the 10 million illegals who crossed into the US since the beginning of the Biden administration have probably helped extend the US economic expansion by easing the tight labor market. So ironically, illegals are helping to prop up the US dollar. Innovation and population growth are the key drivers of economic success and currency returns in the brave new world. By the way, the correlation between my currency ranking and the average of the innovation and population growth ranking is over 50%. Over the past few months, I've been making the case for a Trump victory in November. Whilst the market has decided to view a second Trump term through the lens of inflation, I prefer to see it through the lens of innovation. Trump has promised to deregulate, which should help boost innovation. The fact that Elon Musk will have a big role in this administration makes me think that innovation will be the biggest winner under Trump 2.0. By the way, innovation that raises labor productivity will be ultimately disinflationary. Trump will crack down on illegal migration, but with more than 10 million people having entered the country over the last 4 years, there will be enough reserved for the labor supply for the next 4 years. Furthermore, Trump wants to increase skilled immigration. In my view, if Trump does get a second chance, the dollar will be difficult to beat in 2025. Canada and Australia have higher population growth than the US, but they fare poorly in innovation. Japan is trying to up its game in innovation, but its population is falling. Europe is falling in the innovation league table, but has also low population growth. India and Brazil are too low down in the technology food chain to really threaten the US. Russia also has a falling population. This leaves only China as a viable challenger to the US. But Chinese population is shrinking, and China's quest to move up in the innovation game is being hampered by US sanctions. I also like the Singapore dollar and the Swiss franc. They're expensive, but they might get more expensive. And owning them alongside the US dollar also provides a nice hedge in the event the world suddenly discovers it owns too many dollars. On that note, thank you for listening.